Hi, and welcome to today's session where we're going to be talking about mental health. Now, this is a really exciting one and one that I've been closely involved in researching pretty much obsessively for the last kind of 6 or 7 years in particular, because I've had close personal experience with trying to help someone with mental health problems, someone in my immediate family. And I've also suffered from bouts of depression in the past and anxiety, suffered from anxiety quite a bit in years gone by before changing my diet in particular. So I'm really excited to talk about this one today. Before I forget to say it, my name is Andy Shepherd. I'm the clinical lead here at ReadyCare, so I'm the kind of science guy. So in today's session, we're going to be talking about how to improve your mental health. The reason this is so exciting is that over the last maybe 2 or 3 years in particular, a certain type of diet known as the low carb or ketogenic diet is emerging in the literature as a profoundly significant treatment, potential treatment, maybe even adjunctive treatment along with medication, if not standalone, for everything from anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, and so on. So I want to outline that research to you today, and I'll finish on that paper. Before I do, I'm just going to jump right into the connection between diet and mental health, and we'll go from there. Okay, first of all, is the really important thing to know is that your gut mediates everything that your brain does. So it's really important that we keep a healthy gut bacteria and gut microbiome, and I've covered that in a separate session. If you eat a lot of refined carbohydrates, so things like bread, cereal, granola bars, low calorie foods that are also very high in carbohydrate and sugar, and you're eating less real food, your body will send your blood sugar levels high and you produce a hormone called insulin. And insulin has been connected to disruption in hormones and brain function and metabolism, in your weight and your overall levels of inflammation. And again, inflammation has also been linked to your mental health. So it's really important that you have a good diet, that you lower your blood sugar levels and keep your insulin levels under control if you want your mental health to be good. Now, the reason for this is that glucose, which is carbohydrate and sugar, inflames your brain. So this is really important to understand kind of mechanistically the similarities between carbohydrate and sugar. So often my diabetic patients, for example, will say to me, well, I don't eat much sugar, but my blood sugar levels are really high. Why is that? Or they'll say, I eat no sugar and my blood sugar levels are still really high. And there's all these people talking about reversing diabetes and I can't seem to do it. This is a key concept to understand. We know for absolute certain that high levels of a hormone called insulin in the body leads to damage to your brain. Your blood sugar levels going high and your pancreas secreting a hormone called insulin will damage your brain, will damage your gut lining, will cause high blood pressure and weight, which of course will go on to also damage your mental health, because your self-esteem and body image will suffer as a result. So insulin is a key player. The other thing we know is that insulin goes on to cause something known as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, MCI, which is mild cognitive impairment. All of these mental health conditions, even ADHD has been linked to it as well, are caused by high blood sugar levels. In fact, so much so that Alzheimer's is now being referred to in the clinical literature as type 3 diabetes. It's been called diabetes of the brain. So as all the parts of the puzzle start to come together, we start to realize that your overall health, your mental health, your gut health, these things are all interconnected. They're all expressing different kind of interactions between each other. So if you want to have good mental health, if you want to protect your brain, what you definitely want to do from a diet point of view is eat the foods that do not spike your blood sugar levels. Because if you spike your blood sugar levels, you spike that hormone insulin, you end up insulin resistant, you're much more likely to end up with anxiety, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, and ADHD. They're all linked. They're all linked in together. So we know that glucose inflames your brain. Now, glucose comes from two different sources. This is really important. Glucose can come from sugar, as in table sugar or sucrose, or it can come from carbohydrate broken down in the body. So quite often this is news to my diabetic patients, but when I say to them, the reason your blood sugar levels go through the roof after a sandwich is not because there's any actual sugar in a sandwich. It's that all dietary carbohydrate is metabolized as sugar. So, and this one drives me mad. If you read the food label on something, it'll say, I'm trying not to say a brand name, flakes of corn. You know what I'm trying to say here. Flakes of corn, for example, it would say on a box of flaked corn cereal, it will say 80 grams of carbohydrate, and then underneath it will say of which sugar is 2 grams. And you go, but there's only 2 grams of sugar. That's half a teaspoon. That's nothing. But actually, all of the 80 grams is metabolized as sugar in the body. So all dietary carbohydrate, which can be metabolized by the human body, so which is digestible, so not including fiber, is metabolized as blood sugar. So it's always a shock to my diabetic patients, but I'll say a bowl of porridge or a bowl of flaked corn cereal will leave you with roughly the equivalent to 14 to 18 spoons of sugar in your blood, roughly speaking. Same with potatoes, same with rice. And this whole brown rice is better and brown bread is better. Only marginally. It's only marginally better. If personally speaking, if I had my way, I would say humans shouldn't really eat bread. We really shouldn't. Brown or white or sourdough, it doesn't really matter. In small amounts, maybe, but generally speaking, I wouldn't. And from a mental health point of view, these are the foods that often contribute to the most brain inflammation. So refined carbohydrates, so bread, rice, pasta, cereals, scones, muffins, all that sort of stuff. And then also the other ones that are big contributors are industrial seed oils. So vegetable oils like rapeseed oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, 1-cal sprays, all that sort of stuff. They're really, really pro-inflammatory for your brain. So I would avoid them. So personally, I cook everything in tallow, beef tallow, which is kind of like lard, like your grandparents would have used, or Kerrygold butter, or avocado oil, or olive oil, although it's not all that heat stable, so it tends to have a low smoke point. So I'll usually add that to food as opposed to cooking with it. So beef tallow, avocado oil, and sometimes olive oil, coconut oil maybe. So we know from the literature of the last number of years that refined carbohydrates are really deleterious for mental health. So I'll explain why. If you eat a lot of processed carbohydrate, if you eat a lot of, sandwiches and cereals and granola bars and that sort of stuff, what will happen is you'll end up on this blood sugar roller coaster. Your sugars will go high, they'll go low, they'll go high, they'll go low. When they go high, you get inflamed, your brain gets inflamed, and you have a lot of sugar going around, so you have a lot of temporary energy. So they do provide energy. You can get energy from carbohydrates, although the minimum amount of carbohydrates you need for optimal human health is 0. There is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. This is something that people conflate and confuse all the time. They'll say, well, sure, you need carbs for energy or for your brain. You don't actually. You can use carbohydrates for energy, but you can also metabolize ketones. This is where people on ketogenic diets, and also our ancestors for 2.4 million years who had no real supply of carbohydrates, had loads of energy and would go hunting for 48 hours a day because they were using ketones, which is fat broken down into something known as beta hydroxybutyrate and ketoacetate. And there's a few different ones. So you can use fats. I'd say I probably haven't eaten more than kind of 20 or 30 grams of carbs for about 4 or 5 years, 20 or 30 grams a day. Most people eat about 300 or 400. I've had no problems with energy as far as I know. So you do not need carbohydrates for your brain. That's a misconception. Your brain can derive glucose separate from carbohydrates through a source known as gluconeogenesis. So it's getting into the weeds a little bit with the sciencey stuff, but it's interesting nonetheless. So if you look at remote tribes around the world who never eat fruit or vegetable and only eat meats and fats and stuff like that, and you're thinking, where do they get their energy from? They derive it from something known as ketones. Now, this is really interesting because ketones are incredibly beneficial from a mental health point of view. They're really anti-inflammatory through a mechanism, for those who are into the science, known as NLRP1 inflammasome, NLRP3 inflammasome, which is an anti-inflammatory pathway in the body. So ketones, when you can provide the brain with ketones, they're really anti-inflammatory and they're really good from a mental health point of view. Glucose is an unstable fuel source. So if you're constantly running on carbs and glucose and sugar, it's up and down every couple of hours. But your body can make ketones from 2 sources. It can make them from your own body fat or dietary fat. So if we think about that, if you go 5 or 6 hours without food, this is the reason why people on ketogenic diets get much, much lower appetites. And I'd be the same. I could comfortably go all day without food till 6 or 7 p.m., no problem at all. Or do a 24-hour fast. Whereas before, no way. I'd have to eat every hour or two, or I'd be cranky and tired. So once you become fat adapted through therapeutically restricting carbohydrates and eating more fat and protein, your body learns or builds metabolic machinery to use fat as a fuel source. So you become fat adapted. So when that happens, you can transition from dietary fat to body fat seamlessly. So if I have bacon and eggs in the morning and 2 o'clock comes that I haven't got a chance to get lunch, my body would say, there's no problem. I can just burn body fat for fuel but you can't do that if you're carb fueled, if you're used to running on carbs. It takes a few weeks to get used to doing it. And this has profound effects on mental health. So we saw this mechanistically over the last few years in the literature. And we saw reports of people with schizophrenia and bipolar and all sorts of mental health disorders like anxiety and depression getting remarkably better, much, much better, even though they were drug resistant. So the SSRIs or the antidepressants didn't do much good. And then this study came out over the last few months, which really blew everything out of the waters in the mental health sphere. So I'll talk you through what this study outlined first, and then I'll show you the results. This study looked at the very seriously mentally ill people who had chronic anxiety, major depressive disorder, full-blown schizophrenia, and full-blown bipolar. And they looked at it and said, if we put them on a ketogenic diet, so that means restricting your carb intake, so getting rid of all bread, rice, pasta, and potatoes, all that sort of stuff, and eating more meat, eggs, cheese, dark chocolate, nuts, seeds, all that sort of stuff. What will happen to these patients? Because mechanistically, we knew the ketones were anti-inflammatory and could help your mental health. And the results were just absolutely incredible. So a really good result would have been that everybody got a bit better and their mental health got a little bit better. An incredible result would have been like, I don't know, 10% of patients maybe didn't have schizophrenia or bipolar at the end of the trial, which was 4 months long, bear in mind. Now, bear in mind as well, there is no drug on earth that will just get rid of all cases of depression. There is no drug on earth that will get rid of or put you into remission from schizophrenia and bipolar. They will only treat the symptoms and make you a little bit better. So check out these results. At the end of the study on a ketogenic diet, and this was run in France, 28 patients with bipolar, major depression, and schizophrenia, 43% achieved clinical remission. So if we let that sink in for a second, 43% of patients who had schizophrenia and bipolar no longer had schizophrenia and bipolar. They no longer met the diagnostic criteria to say they were schizophrenic anymore at the end. Symptoms improved in 100% of patients. 96% of them lost weight, because we know if you dial down your sugar and carb intake, you lose weight as well. And 64% were discharged on less or no medication. There is not a drug on earth that can do that. I mean, that is just absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. So 43% achieve clinical remission. So the upshot of this and the thing to take away from today's seminar is, if you want to improve your mental health as an adjunct, as an add-on to medications, I'm not for a second disregarding medications as a treatment for mental health. Some of them are incredibly effective, others not so effective. But one huge lever you could pull, a couple of them: exercise, intermittent fasting, and diet. Particularly a ketogenic diet. So if you reduce down your carb intake, so get rid of or minimize your intake of bread, rice, pasta, cereals, potatoes, bananas, and so on. Eat much more strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, above ground vegetables, full fat Greek yogurt that's low in sugar and carbohydrate, meat, eggs, cheese, salad, stir fries, all of that sort of stuff. But in particular, dial down your intake of carbohydrates. That will send your body into a state known as nutritional ketosis, which is incredibly therapeutic, anti-inflammatory, and protective and helpful for your brain. I've experienced this firsthand. My own anxiety and bouts of depression are completely gone within about 6 months of starting a ketogenic diet. So it's been profoundly beneficial for me personally, but of course that doesn't constitute medical advice, nor does any of the stuff I've said, and this is just for informational purposes. If you do have any mental health issues, for God's sake, work in conjunction with your doctor, but have a look at this research, check it out. If you want to know more, if you want to speak with me personally, or if you want to chat about it at all, reach out to us at support@controldtx.com. Guys, I hope you found today's session important, and it means the world to me when people reach out and say, actually, I followed your advice, Andy, and my mental health has been so much better. It's why we wake up in the morning and do this, to be able to improve patients' lives. Thanks for your time, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.